Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown. Today we will be breaking down the 4th episode of The Last of Us. So far this series has been absolutely incredible and it continues to leave excitement for the coming episodes. So let's begin with the 4th episode titled Please Hold My Hand. I won't spoil anything too major that happens with this story, specifically with the games and the future of the show that lines up with those, in the video for the most part. But if I do end up touching on anything that may be considered as a sort of major or big spoiler, I will of course give you all a warning beforehand. Anyways though, we start this episode off with Ellie looking into the mirror, and playing with the gun that she took from Bill and Frank's house from the last episode, aiming it at the mirror, sort of showing that she believes that she can handle herself now that she has her own gun. Something that she has been wanting for a bit now, as she kept looking at Joel's rifle and asking for her own gun in the 2nd episode, which he kept saying no to, of course, just like in the game where he completely refused to allow her to be in the possession of a gun until the point where she ended up saving his life with one at the hotel. She ends up putting the gun back in her bag and walking outside to the abandoned cars at this abandoned gas station where Joel is siphoning some more gasoline from one of the cars for their truck. They start talking to one another and then Ellie grabs a book, no pun intended, volume 2, from out of her bag, which is pulled directly from the game. The jokes that Ellie says in this part of the episode are also directly from the game, basically word for word as well. This book that she has was given to her by Riley in the games during the Left Behind DLC for the game, and which is most likely going to be the case in the show as well, as I believe that the entire DLC and its story will be its own episode, as I do believe that Riley was also mentioned by Marlene in the 1st episode. We can sort of see that Joel is starting to get used to Ellie's presence, as he is clearly attempting to hold back a laugh or smile after she tells her jokes, something that gets built upon a lot in this episode as well, which will eventually lead to the point where he would do absolutely anything to save her life and protect her, and if you played the games, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They then get in the truck that they got from Bill and Frank's from the last episode and head off. As we can see, all of the abandoned cars and vehicles on this road have been pushed to the sides by specialized vehicles that plowed them out of the way. Ellie then mentions that she wants to see a tank after Joel tells her about all of the cars and why they are moved, and he tells her that she will see a tank as well as some other things like that, like a helicopter, and then they end up driving past an abandoned tank on their little road trip. On their drive to the city, Ellie finds a Hank Williams tape in the pocket of one of the seats, and Joel ends up turning it on to listen to, which also happened in the games. A scene that is basically word for word and taken directly from the games happens yet again as Ellie finds an inappropriate magazine, to say the least, where she says the exact same lines that she did in the game, as does Joel, and she ends up throwing it out of the window just like she did in the game, right as they drove past a sign leading to Pittsburgh. Like I said earlier, they end up driving past an abandoned tank on the drive, as well as driving past a rundown and abandoned theme park, resembling the fall of humanity, where they then end up driving past a herd of bison, which symbolizes the hope of life in others, which was a big thing in the game as wildlife seemed to thrive, even to the point of Joel and Ellie finding a group of giraffes. Driving over a bridge that closely resembles the bridge near Pittsburgh from the games that they drove over, and then they end up driving past an Arby's, a FedEx depot, and a collapsed train and train track, resembling just how much the world and humanity has fallen. Deciding to take a break from driving for the night, they end up driving off-road and parking in the middle of the woods to keep away from any sort of dangers, a short little addition that was not in the games. Joel cooks up some 20-year-old Chef Boyardee ravioli to munch on before they sleep for the night to get back on the road right away in the morning and keep driving until they get to the city. Ellie ends up asking Joel if they can start up a fire for the night, and Joel says no, and she assumes it's because the infected would see the smoke, but that is not the case, as Joel says that this area is much too remote for infected, and even if it wasn't, the fungus are not that intelligent. Instead, the real danger out there would be actual humans, which is the first time that something like that is sort of mentioned in the show, and this was a big thing in the games as there were tons of bandits that you would have to deal with and take out. The two take out their sleeping bags and bunker down for the night, where Ellie ends up pulling out the pun book yet again, and word for word, saying the same exact jokes that she used in the games, except this time around, Joel actually answers one of them and goes along with the joke, showing that he is getting around to having Ellie with him and forming a bond with her. He tells her to go to sleep and put the book away after reassuring her that nobody will find them out here, even though after hearing chirping in the woods, he looks around and then turns to his gun, where Joel ends up staying up for what we can assume all night long, keeping watch, which yet again shows that he does in fact care for Ellie and will not let anything happen to her. Ellie wakes up in the morning right as Joel is getting ready to head back onto the road as he starts up some coffee, which is something he would constantly say he missed and loved during the games. They get back out on the road and Ellie starts to ask Joel a ton of questions specifically about Tommy and where he may be. Joel ends up explaining a bit about Tommy's history and background, which we didn't get too much in depth about in the games, as he is a combat veteran. As he served in what they call Operation Desert Storm, his skills in combat helped him get so high up within the ranks of the Butterflies, which is where he ended up meeting Marlene. He explains that Tommy initially joined a group that had their sights set on Boston, and Joel decided to tag along with him to keep an eye on his younger brother and to keep him alive, which is in turn where they ended up meeting Tess. Joel telling all of this to Ellie shows that he is beginning to trust her, as only in the last episode he shut down the idea of telling any stories of his background to her and to just get where they needed to go. Joel makes a remark that Ellie is not seen as family, instead she is just cargo to him, which is also what he referred to her as in the game, and that he is really only having her along with him and taking her to where she needs to go because he made a promise to Tess, who he saw as family. After talking about their histories for some time and analyzing and navigating with the map, which is sort of like a video game interaction or task that would be done in the games, along with the workshop benches and whatnot, Ellie ends up falling asleep in the car just like she did in the game, and she ends up waking back up as they enter the city, which is also exactly how it played out in the game as well. Instead of being Pittsburgh though, like they were in the game, they are in Kansas City instead. Arriving in the city, the road they were headed down ends up being blocked and they have no way to get through it either, so just like in the game, Joel ends up saying screw it and going around to get back onto the road and into the city a different way and on a different road, which ends up taking them right into what sort of dangers that places like this can bring. Finally, in the streets of the city, the two end up driving past a movie theater that was playing two movies that were released in 2003, the year that the outbreak began, Matchstick Man and The Underworld. They also drive past a pile of burnt corpses, something similar that we came across after the initial ambush in the city, making danger even more imminent and matters even more worse for what's going on here in the city. Ellie points out to Joel that the QZ they drive past has the gates wide open and Fedra is nowhere to be seen, showing that they were overthrown and attacked. They quickly look to what's in front of them as a man comes walking out pretending to be hurt, almost identical to how it played out in the game, which is the beginning of this ambush, where Joel does not pay any attention to this man and starts to speed up the truck, nearly running him over and causing the ambush to begin, where these guys throw a cinder block on their windshield and they begin shooting at the truck, which in turn causes them to crash into a laundromat building. Instead of being rammed into by a bus like in the game, they get their tires popped by some spikes that were set up on the road. What comes after this, at least in the game that is some of the most intense and brutal fight scenes that these characters have to go through, specifically with Joel to save Ellie, as in the game after you crash, these guys immediately get their hands on you and are trying to kill you. Where Joel almost got his face slammed into a huge shard of broken glass where he ended up overpowering the bandit, killing him, which he then fought off the rest of these bandits. Instead in the show, they crash into the building and are just being shot at, and Joel covers Ellie as she crawls into an open hole in the wall to safety, leaving Joel to face off against them alone, where he ends up shooting two of them down using the same rifle that he used in the game, a Mossberg 500, before his gun ends up jamming and another unexpectedly comes in from behind that he does not hear and starts to choke him out. Ellie ends up coming out from the hole from behind with Frank's gun that she snuck into her bag from their house in the last episode and shoots the man, saving Joel's life, which is a mirror of what she did in the hotel in the game. The guy ends up surviving the shot though and begins to beg for his life, trying to get them to trade with them, where Ellie seems to not be able to take him out fully, but Joel ends up taking the guy's own knife and taking him out, showing just how cold Joel is, which is something that was shown in the game quite a bit. Joel and Ellie get through the building and sneak their way around the rest of these guys' forces as vehicles close in and discover the outcome of the ambush. Cutting to a shot of some soldiers who I believe are a part of this sort of rebel-like group that also seem to be acting a bit like bandits, as in the games, both Fedra and the rebels are not good groups or people. They are wearing and brandishing different pieces of gear that most likely have been taken from Fedra as they guard one of the buildings that I believe is inside the overrun QZ. Inside of this building that they are guarding, we meet a series original character in what is most likely going to be a villain or antagonist for the time being for the series, named Kathleen for the first time. where she is holding and interrogating a doctor in one of the Fedra cells, a cell that she says may have been the same exact one that her own brother was beaten to death in by Fedra. She reads off from a sign that Fedra has in the cell that basically reads off that those being held in the cell are entitled to and still have basic human rights, like the right to a lawyer, medical attention, family visits, food and clothing, which she does not give to the doctor and instead threatens to kill him. We find out that she is questioning this doctor to figure out where Henry and Sam are, two pretty big characters in the game that brought some pretty intense and very emotional moments and scenes that I do not want to give away. Before she can actually continue interrogating this doctor though, she walks outside due to the commotion and the sounds of the trucks returning, and she learns of the people that Joel killed, and blames Henry for all of this and assumes and accuses him of using a radio that he ended up finding to call in some help, and that help being Ellie and Joel. After asking if one of the rebels will survive, they tell her no, even with the doctor's help, which is where she storms back inside and opens up the cell and shoots and kills the doctor in cold blood. Now, the guy outside that seems to be like her sort of second in command here talks a few times during this episode and right here, and has a pretty recognizable face and especially a recognizable voice. If you could not already tell, and if you did play the games, this is actually Jeffrey Pierce who voiced Tommy in the video games. Having one of the original voice actors making an appearance and playing a role in the show is pretty cool, and I wonder if we could see the original voice actors of Joel and Ellie making some sort of appearance as well. And I do believe that Troy Baker is already confirmed to have a minor role of his own in the series as well, and of course Baker is the one who voiced Joel in the games. Back to the actual episode though, Kathleen goes back outside and orders the rebel forces that she clearly leads here to get armed and ready and to search for any collaborators that may be responsible for the deaths of these rebels and to kill them all. Where they all get back on their trucks that somewhat resembles something you would see in a sort of Purge movie I think, but also those that we have seen in the games as they read "We the People," and another one drives past that has a sort of plow mechanic on the front of it that says "Run," which is pulled directly from the game. They park all of their vehicles in the streets that are in front of the different houses and buildings here in the city, and they begin breaking down the doors and storming the buildings, searching for whoever is responsible for this. As they search the buildings, we see that Ellie and Joel are hunkered down and hiding in the high-low bar as they look through the little peepholes in the glass as the windows are covered by a ton of newspapers. After Joel sits down and the two start talking, we can see that he is squeezing or stretching his hand. This is most likely to readjust it from the hairline fracture, and we can also see that it still has the marks on it from when he beat down that Fedra officer in the first episode. This entire scene is done a bit differently from the game, as Joel tries to comfort and reassure Ellie here by telling her that she is only just a kid and tells her that she does not deserve to go through something like having to shoot or kill somebody, which is different than how he handled or talked about the situation in the game, as he sort of just told her how it was and went along with it, telling her that it was either him or the other guy and that she made the right decision and will most likely have to do it again sometime down the line. In the show, this gets built upon even further as he even goes out of his way to apologize to Ellie for getting her in that situation, where she ends up telling him that it was not actually her first time that she has had to shoot nor kill somebody, where she gets a bit emotional. Now this is probably referring to what happened in the mall, and this is going to most likely happen in an upcoming episode with a flashback. Joel gives Ellie the gun back and teaches her how to properly use it and hold it, which practically mirrors when Joel does this in the game, even down to the point where Ellie is wearing the same exact shirt. She initially says that she learned how to use one from the Fedra schooling that she had, and it seems that they did not teach that properly, so Joel corrects her on it and lets her keep the gun as long as it stays in her bag, which she decides to hide it in her pocket instead, which means she will probably use it again sometime down the line, and probably soon, as Joel gets ready to sneak out of the building with her to get away from the rebels. Back at the laundromat where Ellie and Joel initially crashed into, Kathleen and Perry continue their search for the whereabouts of Henry and Sam, where Perry ends up taking Kathleen to a spot where they found signs of them. He takes her to an attic in one of the buildings where the two have been hiding, and she finds old food cans on the floor, which in turn is what most likely tells her and lets her know that they were out of food, as she does mention that when she comes back down from the ladder. Well, in the attic, she also finds some of Sam's drawings, which depict a few superheroes wearing all blue with a red cape, and these drawings are of him and his brother as superheroes, and we can see that in the drawings the two have orange masks on, which is what Henry has painted over his face at the end of the episode. Perry ends up warning Kathleen of something else that's going on here and leads her into another room where there is a crater on the ground that begins moving up and down like something is under it trying to get out. I do think that we hear the sound of a bloater here when the crater starts moving, foreshadowing at their upcoming appearance most likely being in the next episode already. I also believe that this could be a giant thing of fungus lying underground as well, as Tess explained to Ellie in the second episode that the fungus can run for miles underground, almost like telephone wires. The two decide to keep this hidden for now and under the wire, and to lock down the building just in case, which will most likely come back to bite them, as the previews for the next episode show a ton of infected in what most likely is a bloater. We cut back to Joel as he lifts Ellie up to sneak into one of the buildings through a vent so that she can open the door and let him inside. This entire sequence is just like those little video game sort of tasks where you have the smaller character sneak through the sealed areas to unlock a door or gate, which happened a lot throughout the game. The building is pitch black, and in order to be extra safe and cautious, Joel and Ellie decide to climb up as many flights of stairs as they can before they get tired, so that they are as far away as possible from any sort of danger that may be lurking around here. As they make their way up the stairs, we get a scene full of lines that are pulled directly out of the game. As Ellie asks Joel how he knows that they were going to get ambushed back there, and he tells her that he has been on both sides before, she continues by asking him if he's killed innocent people before, where he says that he, Tess, and those that they were with did what they had to do to survive. Whereas in the game, he kind of just tries to sweep past the question and not answer it fully. This sort of symbolizes how much Joel fell and how cold and heartless he most likely had gotten following the death of his daughter, Sarah. They make it up 32 floors and decide to break into one of the rooms on this floor so that they can hunker down for the night. Joel uses what I can assume is the glass that he smashed through earlier to get into this room to pour on the floor in front of them so that he can hear and know if someone is trying to sneak up on them while they are sleeping. The two talk for a bit before dozing off to sleep, and Ellie asks him if he has hearing problems or if he is deaf in his right ear, as he did not even hear Brian sneaking up behind him at the laundromat earlier during the ambush. She asks him if it's because he's been shot there before, and he tries to change the conversation after saying that it is most likely from shooting so much rather than being shot himself. But we do remember from the last episode that he mentioned a scar that he has near his temple area on that side of his face, which he may have gotten there from a bullet hitting him, possibly one that was shot at him when Sarah ended up also being shot and then killed at the start of the outbreak, which would make sense as to why he is trying to brush it off so quickly, and also why he turns aside to face away from Ellie after she mentions it. Joel tries to ask Ellie about what she had said earlier about the fact that she has had to kill somebody before, but she says that she does not want to talk about it, and they both get ready to go to sleep. Before going off to bed though, Ellie lightens the mood up a bit after the serious questions and conversations that they have been having lately by telling another one of her jokes from the book, which causes them both to burst out with laughter in a moment that felt really organic for the two characters and actors. They end up both falling asleep, but Joel is eventually woken up by Ellie saying his name over and over as she's being held at gunpoint by Sam, and Joel jumps up to see that he is also being held at gunpoint by Henry, who, like I mentioned earlier, has the orange mask painted on his face. The two being the people that Kathleen and her people are after, and in the games the two are survivors from Hartford, and they end up teaming up with Joel and Ellie for some time. The conflict with Kathleen and her group is a new aspect being brought to the series, as it was not in the game, and the episode ends off after Joel and Ellie are woken up by Sam and Henry. Overall, another absolutely fantastic and fun episode with some minor changes to the story and some sequences compared to the game, and with the past 3 episodes going above and beyond with almost every single aspect, this, I think, does it yet again. I'm excited to see where we go with Henry and Sam and the new aspects of Kathleen and her group being brought into the story now. This series continues to hit perfectly, and I think this episode is easily an 8.5 out of 10 or so if I had to rate it. But of course, I would like to hear your thoughts on it as well, so make sure to leave them down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown on this episode, don't forget to give it a like, and with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.